Hello everyone. Welcome to my class, and I'm going to start with the chapter Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Now, Nelson Mandela, as we all know, was the first black president of South Africa after more than 3 centuries of white rule. He fought against the apartheid regime of South Africa. Now, what is apartheid? Apartheid is a political system that separates people according to their race. Nelson Mandela and his African National Congress spent a lifetime fighting against apartheid. He had to spend 30 years in prison, and finally, democratic elections were held in South Africa in 1994, and Mandela became the first black president of a new nation. This extract from his autobiography speaks about the inauguration ceremony that was held in the Union Buildings in Pretoria. For decades, this building had been the seat of white supremacy, and now everyone saw people of different countries, of different colors, attending the installation of South Africa's first democratic, non-racial government. The chapter begins with the experience that Nelson Mandela shares when he was elected the President of South Africa on 10th of May. He says that it was 10th of May when the dignitaries and world leaders came to pay their respect on this South African soil. He calls this day as lovely autumn day and bright and clear, as after so many years at last they got victory over racism. When he went to take oath, he pledged to obey and uphold the Constitution and to devote himself to the well-being of the Republic and its people. To the assembled guests and the watching world, he said that they have conferred glory and hope to newborn liberty. The experience of an extraordinary human disaster which lasted too long must be born of a society which all humanity will be proud of. Before, they were the outlaws and they were not allowed to have any sort of privileges, and today they are hosting the nations of the world on their soil. He thanked the distinguished guests and described about the common victory for justice, for peace, and for human dignity that they have taken the possession of. He pledged to liberate all people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discriminations. He quoted that never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. These were the sayings of Nelson Mandela when he addressed his people for the first time. It was not only a display of pinpoint precision and military force, but it was a demonstration of the military's loyalty to democracy, to a new government that had been freely and fairly elected. Then there were after so many years, they have got the freedom, and the South Africans, the generals and the military forces, which had been bedecked with ribbons and medals from days gone by, they saluted him and pledged their loyalty towards him. Now Mandela was recalling the days not so many years before. They wouldn't have saluted him but arrested him. Now this day was symbolized by the playing of two national anthems of theirs, where the vision of the whites singing Nkosi Sikelel, Africa, and blacks singing Die Stem, which was the old anthem of the Republic. After the Boer War, the white-skinned people of South Africa patched up their differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned people of their own land. The structure they created formed the basis of one of the harshest and most inhuman societies the world has ever known. And after 8 decades after the birth of Nelson Mandela, that system had been overturned forever. And this was replaced by one which recognized the rights and freedoms of all people regardless of the color of their skin. Now it was an unimaginable sacrifice of thousands of people whose sufferings and courage can never be counted or repaid. He was pained and was not able to thank them, and they were not able to see what their sacrifices had brought today. The policy of apartheid created a deep and lasting wound in the people of the country. They have spent many years recovering from that profound hurt, and it will take many years again to heal up that wound. And the decades of oppression and brutality had another unintended effect on them, and that was that it produced the freedom fighters like Oliver Tambo's, the Walter Silas, the Chief Luthulis, the Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fishers, the Robert Sobukes of their time. And these men were of such extraordinary courage, wisdom, and generosity that probably this country will never have again. Now Mandela again says that his country is rich in minerals and gems that lie beneath its soil, but he considers the people of his country as the greatest wealth finer and truer than the purest diamonds. He again says that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. What it means is that it is not, humans will have the fear. These are the feelings they will have, but you should know how to conquer over it, how to conquer that fear. So, he says that even in the grimmest times in prison, when he was with his comrades and they were have their limitations, he could see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards. Maybe it was for a second, but it was enough for them to reassure and keep going with the flow. And that's why he says that man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. Then Mandela talks about the twin obligations. He says that every man has twin obligations. Obligation towards his family, to his parents, to his wife and children, and he has an obligation to his people, his community, his country. But in a country like South Africa, this is impossible for a man of his birth and color to fulfill both of these obligations. Like a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. A man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart. Now Mandela says that he had the freedom in childhood. He had the freedom of everything. He was free in every way, the way he knew at least what freedom means. He was free to go in the fields. He was free to swim in the clear stream. He was free to roast maize under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow-moving bulls. But then, when he came to his boyhood stage, he understood that this freedom is an illusion. He discovered as a young man that his freedom had already been taken from him. As a student, he wanted freedom for himself, the transitory freedom of being able to stay at night out, read what he pleased and go wherever he chose to. But slowly he saw that not only he, but many people like him are not free. He saw that it was not just freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom to look the way he wanted to. So, when he joined the African National Congress, and that when he wanted to have greater freedom for the freedom of his people, he wanted the freedom for his people. It was this desire for the freedom of his people to live their lives with dignity and self-respect that compelled him, transformed this frightened young man into a bold one who has driven a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal. He was turned from a family-loving husband into a man without a home, which forced him to go self-sacrificing and enjoy the poor and limited freedoms that he was allowed when he knew that his people are not at all free from all this. Freedom, according to him, is indivisible. The chains on any one of his people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of his people were the chains on him. He says, I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. And the oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. This was the speech by Nelson Mandela and his experience that he has shared, and this extract tells us about his experience on the very first day when he delivered his speech. Thank you.